Paro El Yosef, chapter 47, verse 5. And Paro says to Joseph, saying, Avicha ve'achacha ba'u. Your father and your brothers have come to you. Eretz Mitzrayim lefanecha. The land of Egypt is yours. B'meitav haaretz, from the best of the land. Hosheves avicha ve'asachecha. Settle your father and your brother. Yeshvu ba'aretz Goshen. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. Mim yadata. But if you know that there are v'yesh bam anshe chayil, if you know that there are capable men, v'samtem sarim mifnei al asher, then you shall place them to watch over my sheep. Rashi says, anshe chayil bekiyan bu manusan. It doesn't mean soldiers, Rashi says, it means experts at their job. We're oat sown to graze the sheep. That's what he said. Because usually chayil in the Torah means an army. But here it doesn't mean an army because it doesn't make sense. Vayaveh Yosef es Yaakov aviv, and Joseph brought his father Pharaoh. Vayamideu ifnei Paro, and he brought him in front of Pharaoh. Vayvarech Yaakov es Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. What does Rashi say? Jacob blessed Pharaoh. He she'ilat shalom. This blessing is actually a greeting. It's not an actual blessing. Meaning to say, everybody who appears before everybody who's found in front of Pharaoh would make this greeting, Lifrakim. So the reason why Rashi has to say this is because it says the word again later on that Jacob blessed him. So it doesn't mean he blessed him twice. It means the first time he gave like a greeting, a formal greeting. That's what Rashi says. Vayomer Paro El Yaakov Kama Yemei Shnei Chayecha. This is an unusual verse. I think this might be the only time in the Torah that somebody asks him, "How old are you?" We never have such a verse in the Torah where somebody asks, "How old are you?" Maybe there is. I don't remember. He says, "Why would he ask that question?" He says, Kami Yemei Chayecha, how old are you? Vayomer Yaakov al Paro. This is what I believe. Here, take a chumash from here, Reb Aaron Zamir. This is what I believe is the saddest verse, one of the saddest verses in the whole Torah. Yaakov says to Paro, Yemei Shnei Migurai, the years of my life are Shoshimu Ma'at Shana, 130 years, Ma'at Viraim, few and bad. My years are few and what I had was bad. It's like the old joke, the food was terrible and there wasn't enough of it. And that's what he's saying here. My life is short and there wasn't it, and it was bad. I never reached the age of my ancestors in their life. Rashi says, Yemei Geruti, the days of my living or moving around. My whole life I was a ger, a wanderer in the land. They have not reached the days of my father's lifetime. What do you mean he hasn't reached his father's lifetime? He's much younger. He can still get there. So Rashi says, Betov, I never reached the goodness that they were able to get. I didn't have it easy.
He's only 130.
He's only 130. That's the question. He's only 130. By our standards, that'll be real old. Yes, Jerry.
I'd like to go back to Pasuk 7, where 6, where Pharaoh says, have your men take charge of my livestock. What kind of livestock did Pharaoh have? Surely not sheep.
That's a very, very good question. Why wouldn't have sheep? Because earlier we had said, Jerry's commenting, because yesterday we said that Pharaoh, the Egyptians didn't want sheep. So therefore, if they were watching the sheep, they put the Jews far away. And they were afraid to have these animals. So you must say that, it was like, even though he wasn't supposed to, he must have had some on the sly, and that he had he had, he was a silent partner, let's say. You know what I'm saying?
Steinfeld says that the Egyptians were not shepherds, but they possessed some livestock, which was designated not for consumption, but for wool, milk, and others.
Did you hear this, Jerry?
They could be cows and bulls, right?
Well, Rabbi Steindl says that they had them for their wool, but it could be cows and bulls. It's possible that even though they're not shepherds, they needed some sheep, and like there's certain things, like you say, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Maybe he told the Egyptians not to have, but he had.
Yeah, and probably they were meat eaters, so they had to have some kind of cattle to eat meat.
Well, they apparently they were not meat eaters. Dr. Bryan has investigated this, and he says that they were not meat eaters, but they ate. But he wouldn't be also the first ruler in history to have a separate standard for himself than he has for the rest of the people.
I just think the Egyptians didn't think it was appropriate to.
I read something that they thought that cows and sheep were like incarnations of their god.
It seems to be that they were there's a lot of theories that this was their deities. Yes, that's
So
what
the Jews in a way, because that's why they got rid of the blood.
Steinsaltz goes on to say that even though there was a famine, that Yosef had squirreled away like animal fodder to sort of keep this livestock going, because that was he knew that they were aware anyway. They were aware of the animals, Jerry. So it's not like a point that it's not raised.
Yeah, I know. Hold on 1 second.
How could he know that he wasn't going to reach the age of his father or grandfather?
No, so Rashi addresses that question. My father's asking, how did he know? He says, I haven't reached the age of my ancestors, but it doesn't mean that. Rashi says, below hisigo doesn't mean I won't reach their age. It means I didn't achieve their goodness. Rashi says, betova, in goodness.
I'm the trickster and not the honest son that I should be.
All right. So now the next pasuk, feel better there, Jerry. Next pasuk means Vayivarach Yaakov es Paro vayetze mifnei Paro, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and he went out from before Pharaoh. Rashi says, and Jacob blessed. Kenderech kol haniftarim. This is like everybody who leaves mifnei sarim, from the presence of the king. Mivarchim osam, you bless them, v'notlim reshut, and you take permission to leave. Uma bracha bercha. What blessing did he bless Pharaoh? The blessing that Jacob gave Pharaoh is sheyala nilus l'ragav, that the Nile should rise to his feet. V'fi she'ein eretz Mitzrayim shota mei geshamim, because the land of Egypt does not really get rainwater. Ela nilus oleh, the Nile rises. The Nile is fed from Africa. Umashke, and it irrigates it. Umi birchatosha Yaakov ve'elach, and in time of Jacob's blessing, Pharaoh ba'al Nilus, Pharaoh would come to the Nile, the Nile would rise towards him, umashkes aretz, and that would irrigate the land. You can imagine it, like, I'm just speaking, if I wasn't a believer, if I was a cynic, I would say that Pharaoh might have figured out when the Nile rises from his scientists. And then he had this technology, this awareness of information, and then he can manipulate the situation that he's going to tell the people, I'm going down to the Nile at this point, and all of a sudden they see the Nile rising to see him, and then they're like, wow, Pharaoh makes the Nile rise. They must have known.
The water increased the same every year.
Yeah, but maybe the people didn't have that technology to be aware of it. The peasants didn't know, but Pharaoh knew.
They have very good technology in that period, particularly astrological.
So maybe they were just pretending and going along with the show.
I learned that.
Culture was dependent on the Nile.
Yeah, everything. But yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I learned that the Nile rises on time periodically to irrigate the land.
That's what says right here. That's what Rashi says.
Yeah,
There's dependence on rainfall, because there isn't any.
That's what Rashi says. No rainwater. Rashi knew Egyptian water.
It's amazing.
Victoria. The water comes from Lake Victoria.
Yeah.
But
Wait, hold on one second. We have Steve here is commenting. What were you saying, Steve?
Well, I've been in the Nile Delta, and it's almost like night and day. As soon as you reach the edge of where the natural water comes from the Nile, it's desert. There's no in between.
River, desert.
Yeah,
I see.
real desert, and just blank.
Well, I've seen topographical maps where it's green and then just brown.
That's right.
Yeah, it is.
There's no
It's like a
in between.
fence.
Okay, very interesting. And yes, Jerry, did we cut you off?
no, so it doesn't, so the Nile River does not come from Lake Victoria.
No, it does, but
Okay, but
it
now,
does.
yeah, but now that the rain, we were having climate change, I imagine the Nile River today is very low and it probably is not flooding the fields of Egypt.
We have a dam now, it's called the Aswan Dam.
So now they have a dam, the Aswan Dam, so they're able to manipulate it
Yeah,
accordingly.
right. I forgot about the dam.
There's a chumash there. Okay, so they don't have a problem anymore. All right, so next verse says, Vayoshev Yosef es Aviv. We're in chapter 47, verse 11. Vayoshev Yosef es Aviv es Achiv. Vayitain lem achuzah beretz Mitzrayim. V'meitav haaretz beretz Ramses kasher tziva paro. And Joseph settled his father and brothers, and he gave to them an inheritance in the land of Egypt from the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, just like Pharaoh had commanded them. Joseph gave an allowance of food to his brothers and to his father and his brothers and the entire father's house. Rashi says, all the members of the household. So he took into account everybody's needs. And there was no bread in the land. There was no bread in the land. Or bread here does not mean, lechem does not mean bread, it means food. Lechem ein b'kol haaretz. There was nobody in the land that had food. Ki kaved harav ma'od. The famine was very great. V'ateu haaretz Mitzrayim v'aretz Canaan b'nei harav. And the land of Egypt and Canaan became very weary on account of the famine. Rashi says, Chozer l'inyan rishon. They're going back to the original topic. Excuse me, l'tchilat shnei ha'ra'av, to the beginning of the famine. So now we're going back to the beginning. Rashi says that now we're going back to the second year, or giving us the context of what Joseph did previously. Vayilaket Yosef and Kol HaKesef. Oh, wait, I skipped a verse. Vatela became weary. Kamo vatil Lashon ayefut, an expression of tiredness. Kemitlaleya yorezikim, like one who wearies of shooting flaming arrows. That's the verse from Proverbs. Okay, so now what happened next? Yosef Joseph collected all the money, and Himtza Beretz Mitzrayim is found in the land of Egypt, Beretz Canaan, land of Canaan, Bashevar Asher Heim Shovrim, with the money that they were purchasing. Yosef es hakesef Beita Paro. Joseph brought the money to the house of Pharaoh. Rashi says, Bashevar Asher Heim Shovrim. They would give Joseph the money. Okay. Vayitom hakesef me'eretz Mitzrayim. They ran out of money. Me'eretz Canaan. They ran out of money in the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Canaan. Vayavo kol Mitzrayim, and all of Egypt came to Joseph saying, Hava lanu lechem, give us food. V'lama namus negdecha. Why should we die? Why should we die in front of you? Ki afes kasef. We have no money. They were begging. Kitargamo, afes means shalim. Our money is used up. Vayomer Yosef, havu miknechem. Bring me your cattle. So they also had cattle here. I'll give to you for your cattle if your money is run out. And they brought their cattle to Joseph. Joseph gave them food. gave them food in exchange for their horses, their sheep, their cattle, their donkeys. And he managed them with bread, with food in exchange for their cattle that whole year. Rashi says is like Vayinahagim. He ruled over them. It's like Minahel today. By calm waters he will lead me. Says the verse, he in that year finished. They came to him in the second year. And they came to him in the second year and they said, listen, we have nothing left. We've run out of money, we run out of cattle. The only thing we have left are our bodies. Rashi says, Bashana Shenit, in the second year, Shenit L'Shnei Arab. This is the second of the years of the hunger. Kim Tama Kesef, Ki Asher Tama Kesef V'Meknev. That money in the herds have been exhausted. Uba Kol Yad Adoni. Everything has come into my possession of my Lord. Biltim Gviotenu, except for our bodies. Verse, what we're seeing here is Yosef is basically at the same time that he's quote unquote saving the Egyptians, he's building up the central government. He's collecting all the money, all the assets of the Egyptians, including their bodies, and transferring it into the coffers of Pharaoh. He's made Pharaoh so powerful, so now Pharaoh can turn in a second on anybody and enslave them. He's basically enslaving the Egyptians like he's going to eventually enslave the Jews. Joseph is the one who's doing that. Verse 19. Yes, Jerry.
It says that the people, in exchange for food, they gave them cattle and sheep. Now, our whole philosophy was that sheep were part of their God, their religion.
Right. Now, I pointed that out, Jerry. You're correct. It must be that we were wrong, that they had sheep and cattle. They just didn't like to. They just felt it was an abominable job, but they must have had them. It was a dirty job. Nobody wanted to do it, but it was there.
Okay. So the other point I want to make is anti-Semitism, the idea of the Zionist worldwide conspiracy, probably is based upon this story where Joseph the Jew collects all the money and is in charge of everything.
Well, I don't know if it's based upon the story. They don't really need any help to hate us. They have their own methods. But you can say that the enmity that Pharaoh feels for Joseph's descendants may be rooted in this. It must have aroused some upset amongst the people. So now verse 19 says, Lama namut leinecha. Why should we die before your eyes? Gam anachnu, gam matenu, us and our land. Kineo sanu lesan matenu belechem. The Egyptians say to Pharaoh, acquire us with food, meaning to say, give us food and you'll own us. We and our lands will be slaves to Pharaoh. Matain zera, give us seed. Give us seed so we live and we will not die, and the land will not become desolate. So basically, Pharaoh is enslaving them. Matain zera was roa adama, to seed the ground. Even though Joseph said, even though he said there's going to be another 5 years in which there will be no plowing or harvest. Once Jacob came, because he was asking, why do you need seed? So once Jacob showed up, they began to sow, and the famine ended. So Jacob stopped the famine.
Why do you think it made them slaves?
Because his job was to work for Pharaoh. His job was to work for Pharaoh.
They're only paying a tithe on the crop.
Sounds more like sharecroppers than slaves.
Right.
Well, look at wait, we're not done. Look at we're not done. Will not be desolate. Look what else he's about to do. Look at the next verse. Look at the next verse. Vayiken Yosef is called Admat Mitzrayim. Joseph acquired all of the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. Ki machlu Mitzrayim ish sadeu ki chazak lahem harav atiyah aretz leFaro. Joseph acquired all of the land for Pharaoh because the famine was great and the land became Pharaoh's. Kenuyalo, he owned it. He had the deed. Ve'esa'am he'evir oso ha'arim mitzeg vo mitzrayim v'ad katzeu. The people, Joseph passed through the land from one end of the land until the other. Meaning to say, Joseph did population transfer. I think somebody in China did that, right? Who was that, Steve? In China, didn't somebody do that maybe 50 years ago? It's part of the communist revolution. They moved the people. Yeah, but they moved the people around because it's a tried and true method of the dictators to prevent revolutions. That you mix up the people so they don't have the people around them. Let's see what Rashi says. Joseph kept moving the people around from city to city. Was Zikaron as a reminder? He says, you don't own the land. Because if they would have kept the people in the place, they would have done a revolution and they would have thought that they owned the land. So he settled the residents of one city in a different city. Wow, very, very painful. He doesn't want the people remaining. He put them all together without knowing the right language. It makes it much more difficult to do a revolution. The verse is trying to praise Joseph. Oh, Joseph did this. He did this whole technique just so his brothers wouldn't be the only refugees in the land. He wanted everybody to be refugees. So therefore he did this to protect them. But if somebody did this today, you can imagine we would call them population transfer. It wouldn't be really so popular today.
And we live.
I don't know how popular it was at that time either.
They weren't really too popular, but there was one group of people who was not, there were two groups of people who were not affected by this. The Jews, and now the second group. But first we'll see. But he did this in all the borders. He did this throughout the land, except he didn't do this for the land of the Kohanim, the priests. And there was a law for the Kohanim from Pharaoh. Because there was a law for the priests from Pharaoh that they ate of the stipend that Pharaoh had given them, and therefore they did not sell the land. But who was Joseph married to?
Potiphar.
Remember what his name was. Osnat Bat Potiphera. What's Kohen owned? He's married to a Kohen's daughter. So Joseph is exempting from this rule, from the land acquisition and the population transfer. He's exempting his brothers and also the Kohanim of the land, who happen to be his family also. That's a little convenient. Rashi says, Hakamarim, the court. Well, I'm sorry, Larry, I cut you off.
No, it's just say nepotism.
Right. Hakohanim, Hakamarim, the clergymen. Kolashon Kohen, Misharet Lelohutu. Any expression of a Kohen means somebody who serves a deity. Chutzmi osa shehem lashon gedula, except for those which means prominence, like Kohen Mijan, Kohen On. Oh, so Rashi's telling us that Rashi's landing on this by saying that Yosef's father-in-law was not a priest, he was just prominent. The word Kohen, Rashi saying, can mean a priest. Hello, we have a Kohen, two Kohanim who just walked in. One of them walked, one of them is flying in. And he's telling us that Kohen can mean a priest or it can mean prominent. Like Moshe's father-in-law was a Kohen. He gave to them a certain amount of money every day. So they were given a stipend. So Joseph says to the people, "Hey, So he says to Joseph, says to the people, behold, I've acquired you today and your land. Everything goes to Pharaoh. Take some seed and plant the ground. Hey means like kine. And then he says, Vaya batfuot umitatem chamishit leparo. And then here's the grain, and you should give 1/5 to Pharaoh. So he's basically saying, you're gonna give 20% of everything you grow to Pharaoh, and 80% you keep for yourself. So basically, Pharaoh gets 20% of the gross.
So does the IRS.
IRS gets, I don't know, it depends what you make.
Wow, this is the original flat tax.
But this is 20% of the gross, not the net. I don't know how that compares to the net, like what percentage of the gross becomes the net, but anyway, it's all gross. He's getting a lot of money for Pharaoh. Pharaoh did okay. Pharaoh did okay here. Rashi says, "V'asher b'batechem, in your households, lecho avadim v'ashvachot, for eating the slaves and the servants that are in your household." Okay, I think we have a minute. We could pray. We could pray. Okay, we'll stop here. All right, we'll stop here. We almost finished the whole parsha this week. All right, we'll stop here.
Well, have a Shabbat Shalom.